Hey everyone, I'm David from Lightning Boy Studio, and today we're going to look at how to make Ghibli-inspired painterly clouds in Blender 2.9. So there's a few ways we could do this. We could look at our previous tutorial, how we made trees, and apply the same technique. So custom particles, apply custom normals. But the problem is we're never going to get those very fluffy edges like you see on clouds. So what I want to do today is show you an entirely new technique that's based on volumetrics, but that's actually way more powerful and customizable. So I hope you guys are excited, and without further delay, let's get started. All right, let's do this. Before we start, just make sure to activate the Node Wrangler. You can go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, type in Node Wrangler. Make sure this is activated. That way we have all the same shortcuts as I do in the node editor. It will be much easier for you to follow along. So the first thing I'm gonna do is make a basic volumetric object. And we're not actually going to use it for the cloud, but we're gonna use some of the same principles. And so I think it's gonna be useful for me to show you some of the issues I have with the default volumetrics in Blender. That way you'll better appreciate all the differences once we make our own upgraded version for this tutorial. So the way it works is you click on this cube, go to Material, and then replace the principled BSDF by a principled volume. Now you can extend your timeline and press Shift F3 a bunch of times until you see your nodes. And make sure to plug your volume into volume, not surface. Now, if you hold down Z, you can change this to rendered. And if you grab your light and move it closer, you notice that you start seeing this volume. So first thing that bothers me a bit is how it flickers really weirdly as you move the camera around. So even if you go to your render settings, volumetrics, and bump up this to like just 2 pixels, it's going to look better when you do your render. But as you move around in your scene, I find it kind of annoying, especially as, so on our Dinomancers project, we work just in Eevee, and we like to really get a sense of what the scene's going to look like as we press play, and I just don't like that it's flickering all the time. So small detail, but it's going to be fixed in our own version. Now, one thing volumetrics are really good at is to render three-dimensionally noise textures or gradient textures. So let's say I were to create a, I don't know, a Musgrave texture and plug it into my density, you'll see that I get this 3D texture in my scene. So pretty cool. Now, it might sound useful to be able to fill up an object with a volume, but it's not actually that powerful. And I can demonstrate it by just creating a UV sphere and applying the same material to it. You notice that it still has this cube shape. And the reason is it doesn't actually look at the surface of your mesh, just at the bounding box. So it makes it really hard to sculpt anything that has a precise shape. You have to use a bunch of gradient textures and vector curves to shape your things, and you cannot even use textures because you don't have UVs. So makes it a bit difficult to sculpt a good-looking cloud. But for me, like the final nail in the coffin of this principled volume is you cannot use a shader to RGB node with it. So that means there's no way to make a 2 or 3 tone shader and get that very nice toon shaded look. So if you don't mind, I'm just gonna ditch this and start over with something better. So what I'm gonna do is create a diffuse BSDF. So press Shift A, type in diffuse BSDF. And then I'm also going to create a transparent BSDF. So, and I'm going to mix the two using an image texture I made. So press Shift A, image texture, and I'm gonna open and pick that cloud texture there. So if you want to see it, I just press Shift F10 twice and you can see the cloud texture. So it looks like this. I painted this earlier in Photoshop. You can paint your own, or you can use this one. We'll link it in the video description. And so we use this alpha to drive where things appear transparent and where you see the diffuse. So we're going to mix these two together using Control-Shift right-click. So that's one of the things the Node Wrangler adds as a shortcut. And then we're going to plug the alpha in the factor here and the mix shader in your material output surface. And you won't see transparency right away because you need to activate, and you need to change the blend mode from opaque to alpha hashed and shadow mode to alpha hashed. And now, if I move on my light, you'll see that there is actually transparency, but it still looks wrong. And the reason is we're using UVs from a cube, but we need to project it from the front. So let me go in front view here and go in edit mode with tab, press U, and then project from view. And then we'll go in the UV editor. So press Shift F10 and then press on L and UV pack island. So it's gonna fill up that UV space nicely. And you can go back to the shader editor, pressing Shift F3. So now you see we have our cloud texture applied to the cube on both of these surfaces because it's projecting it from the front. And you have this nice fuzzy edge like we want. But the problem is we're not filling the cube. Like it doesn't look like a 3D cloud. And the reason is it can only, using the diffuse BSDF plugin surface, you can only apply your textures to surfaces. So we need a surface inside so that you see the cloud. And one way we could do this is just by stacking a lot of planes right next to each other. So I'm going to delete the one in the back here. So just press tab, click on tree to access the faces, and then delete those faces. So you only have the one in the front. And I'm going to go in my modifier panel and add an array. And I'm going to change this to fixed length. You can add a length of 2. And unclick relative offset. Click on constant offset instead. And type in just like 0.5 in Y for now. So as you can see, I have a bunch of planes that have been generated like inside my cube. And as I lower this value, it's going to reduce the distance between the planes. So the more I add, the more it's starting to look like a 3D shape. And it's still retaining that very fuzzy edge at the top because each of these planes have the image texture applied onto it. So we're getting somewhere. Now, there's still obviously a lot of issues. Like it still doesn't look like a cloud. It's way too blocky, and this is way too flat. So let's address the flatness of the front first. We're going to make a custom normal map for it. And it's going to be very different from how we did it in the Ghibli tree tutorial. This time we're going to use an image texture, and we're going to use metaballs to generate it. So press Shift A, metaball, and so you get this ball here. And I don't know if you've ever used metaballs. Honestly, I don't use metaballs very often myself, but they are actually very useful for the kind of thing we're going to do here. So what metaballs do, so if I duplicate this one and just move it up and scale it down, is that they will always merge with each other. And so right now it looks very low resolution, but you can reduce this maybe to 0.02. So now you have this, this sphere, and as you approach it closer, it's going to merge with this one. So let's keep this scene handy at the top. I'm going to open up a new viewport here, and I'm going to okay, so what is that? This. Okay, so I'm going to jump in top view and just try to frame nicely onto it, and then I'm going to move my camera where my viewport is. So to do this, you do Control Alt and 0 on the numpad, and it's gonna just jump your rendering camera at the same place. Now, I want to change my format to something square. So let's just go to the output properties, no, here, and change this to 1000, should be enough. And then I'm going to just scale, make sure that the big one is filling up the square as much as you can. And now the trick, so that we're able to render a normal map is we're gonna click on this little arrow here. And you see there's a button called Matte Cap. And if you click on it, there's actually a material that looks like a normal map in the screen space. So that's really useful because like it's always going to be pointing, the pink color is always going to be pointing in the top, in the bottom right, and the green in the top left, and it's just exactly what we need to render a normal map. So I'm gonna jump back in my camera by pressing 0 on the numpad, and we're gonna sculpt sort of a more complex shape for the front of our cloud. So I'm gonna make a bunch of these spheres here. And to make it a bit faster, I'm going to duplicate a bunch. Maybe 3 or 4. And then if you select all 4 at once and click on your pivot point, you can change it to active element. So if I duplicate this with Shift D, now I have 4 more. And if I pick my big sphere last, so it's going to be my active element, the pivot is going to be at the center of my sphere. So now as I rotate, they're always going to be staring near the surface, you see? So makes it a bit easier to duplicate a bunch. So I just need to unselect the big one, Shift D, and then select the big one back up, rotate them, Shift D, select the big one, rotate, and maybe one last time. Okay, so I'm just going to move them a bit. Try to not go outside of your sphere here, and you can move them up and down with by pressing G for grab and then Z to lock it in the Z-axis as you move them, so they will sink in the shape of your sphere. And what you want to look for is to create sort of an overlap at the top here. So you want the spheres in the middle to be able to get light from the top, so make sure that they're not too faded inside your surface, because you want as much green as possible here so that they will get nice lighting. So I'm gonna sink these ones inside a bit. So this is pretty good. This one I'm gonna sink in just a bit more. And if you want to merge things together, you can just like duplicate one again, make it pretty large, and just like move it up and down so you can fill up this space a bit. So this is almost done, I would say. All right, I think this should be perfect. So just unclick your overlays, and then maybe I could even change the resolution to 0.01 so it renders even a bit smoother. And then go to View, Viewport Render Image, and then Image, Save As, and let's call this Cloud Normal Map. So you can jump back to your shader editor with Shift F3. You need to click on your cloud. All right. We won't really need those metal balls anymore. I'm just gonna put them in a collection for now. So select all of them, press M, new collection, call it normal map baking. So maybe the first normal map you do won't look right, and you want to go back to it, change stuff a bit, and until you get the perfect mix. Like I did practice a lot just to find the right mix, so I'm doing this in front of you, but there's a lot of trial and error behind it. So I'm going to import in another image texture, so Shift A, image texture, and let's open our cloud normal map. And we'll need a normal map node. So Shift A, normal map. And let's plug the color into the color of the normal map. And make sure to change the color space to non-color, otherwise it won't work. And then all you need to do is plug this normal map into the normal of your diffuse. So right away you should see that you have this volume that's appeared on our sphere, and it's still flat. It's not a displacement, it's just a normal map, so we're faking the normals of our flat plane. I think I'm gonna change this light to a sunlight, change the strength to 1. Okay, so it's gonna be a bit softer. So nice, we got some volume. Now it still looks a bit 3D, like I'm sure you'll agree. So we're gonna try to break this shape up a bit. So instead of being very perfect spheres, it's gonna look a bit more fuzzy like the edges of our cloud. So let's make, so Shift A, noise texture, and we're gonna click on this image here of our normal map and press Ctrl T. So that's another shortcut the Node Wrangler adds. And what it does is it brings out the texture coordinates for this image. And we'll be able to then mix the texture coordinates with our noise texture to break it up a bit. So just Ctrl Shift right click, it's gonna add a mix node. And bring the factor to something just a bit lower than 1. And then bump up the scale quite a bit. So as you can see, we're mixing a noise texture with our sphere normal map, and the more we increase it, the more it's going to be distorted. So that way we're able to get a more organic look. So I'd say that's much better. Now let's add some colors to this. I think it might be a good moment to import our image reference. So let's bring in this image from a Ghibli movie, and I really like this cloud. So let's see if we can match this look as close as possible. I think I'm actually going to change the color of my world setting here so that it's also blue. Yeah, that way. Match the blue. All right. And oh yeah, I'm going to change the color management settings to so you won't be able to see it, but if you go to your render properties, at the very bottom there's a color management panel, and changed it from filmic to standard. That will be easier for you to pick colors from an image. Otherwise, there's going to be a bit of a difference. So let's go back to object. And all right, so we're gonna start adding more and more nodes. So let's make a frame maybe so we keep things organized. I'm gonna call this one normal map. Let's bump up this label size, put this in. All right, so this is our normal map, so we don't forget. And now we're gonna add a shader to RGB. So remember, that's the thing we couldn't do if we were using a real, like a volumetric shader. But now we can because we're using a diffuse. So shader to RGB, and then create a color ramp. And put it after the shader to RGB. So now we can remap the colors, the black and white colors, to new colors. So the white color is going to be this kind of yellow, and the black color is going to be kind of blue. And we're gonna move these two closer together. Get more of a toon shaded look. Right, and then I'm gonna add another handle. And it's gonna be a darker color. So we get those darker occluded parts. So let's pick the darker blue. And I'm actually going to duplicate this one. And actually, it's not the same color. I need to pick it. Okay, so just move it closer. So you really get that dark blue, but just at the very, very end. And we're gonna pick it up using Ambient Occlusion. So let's go to Ambient Occlusion here, activate it. And let's enter maybe like 1 and 5. So let me zoom in a bit. So you see, now it's picking up this edge here. because of our normal map. So it's like the surface thinks it's facing very far away from the light at this point. So it's picking up the darkest color you can find. So it gives it a bit of a watercolor feel to it. And as we put more of this cloud piece together, they're going to also cast occlusion onto each other. So it's going to look nice. All right, so I think we're getting somewhere. All right, so now if you remember, we still have a problem of this looking really blocky. So let's try to slowly sculpt this into more of a shape cloud, a cloud shape. So for this, we're going to be using a gradient texture. So Shift A, gradient texture, and we're going to change this to spherical. So it's going to be a spherical gradient in 3D space. And if I click Control T here, I can access the texture coordinates. And let me just demonstrate what it looks like right now. So I'm not going to use my cloud texture for now, just plug the factor into the mixing factor of our mix shader. So as you can see, there's this shape here, and it's actually a sphere. So I can move it back and forth, and it's appearing inside my cube, and I can move it around. And if I want to center it, the best way is, like, you could just move it with location and scale, but the easiest is just to use the object location instead. So it's going to be nicely centered. Great. So now we're going to be mixing these two. So maybe let's create a new frame again, just to keep things tidy. So let's call this one round shape and make it 50, put it in there. Okay. And we're gonna mix our gradient texture with this cloud texture that we had. So Control Shift, right click. It's gonna bring a mix node, change it to multiply. You can click on multiply, just press U, bump the factor to 1. And this is what we're gonna plug into our mix shader now to tell where the transparency appears. So, all right, so from the front, as you can see, we still have our cloud texture, but as we move around, we now have a rounder shape. So still not perfect, but we're getting there. Now, if you look closely, it's gotten a bit more fuzzy because our sphere has faded out the edges. So what I want to do is just add a color ramp right after the multiply, and I'm going to crunch back up those edges just a bit. All right. All right, so now let's break up this even more using another noise texture. So I'm going to press Shift A, noise texture, press Control T again, and we'll call this, we'll put this into a frame. It's going to be called noise. Okay, and we're going to be mixing the noise with the gradient texture, the spherical gradient texture. So Control Shift, right click, mix these two together. Change this to multiply, bump the factor to 1. And now it probably won't look very, very different. Now my scene is starting to lag just a bit, so make sure that this is not too low. Like if your computer is not very fast, just you can put a bit of a higher value here, and it's still gonna look good. All right. So you won't see the noise right away. You need to press Shift A, type in color ramp, and we're going to slide this color ramp between the noise texture and the multiply node. And that way we can crunch it. And now we're starting to deform our cloud. So as you see from back here, it's starting to look a lot nicer, and you can change the scale to something bigger or smaller. Now there's still a bit of an issue here. Like what we want is to break up the round shape in the back, but I think you'll agree that the front really look good. Like we don't want to break it up and create those weird holes in it. So we need to restrict the noise to only be applied in the back, not in the front. So what I will do is add another gradient texture, but this one will keep it in linear. So it's just going to be, oh, sorry. Okay, so I just want to put it in the frame. Okay. I'm gonna press Ctrl T. Well, sometimes if you're in a frame, they might appear somewhere very far away in your scene. It happens. And okay, and let's just plug this directly into our mix shader here, just so that we can see what's going on. So I'm gonna use object coordinates here. Okay, so as you can see, it's not properly aligned. We need to rotate it with rotation Z. So I'm gonna change this to 90 degrees. So it's sitting in the front, and I'm gonna change the scaling to 0.2. So it's a bit more faded. So we have this section here that's all white. And so we're going to be adding it to our noise so that it's all broken up in the back and it's 100% white in the front. So let's mix these two, the color ramp and the gradient texture, with Ctrl Shift right click. And it's gonna bring up this mix node. But this time we're gonna put it in add. So we're adding this one on top of the noise. And if we want to see just how this one is looking, I'm gonna plug in the mix shader. Sure why it's not working. Okay. Oh yeah, okay. It's because my color ramp is not crunched anymore. So add it. Yeah, all right. I was confused for a moment. So there you have it. So this is perfectly like filled up, and it's being broken up in the back. So this is what we wanna. This is what we wanna multiply with our original round shape. I know it's getting confusing. Like maybe let me zoom back a bit here, because I know some of you are trying to do this as I do it. So let me just show you the overall picture. So you have your normal map. It's being plugged in diffuse BSDF, and then using a shared to RGB, we color it. Then to add transparency, we need to tell where it's transparent. So this should go here. Okay. And so we have our cloud texture, and it's being multiplied by a bunch of stuff. Our round shape, and then our noise texture that is limited to just be in the back. And then we're crunching it just a bit here with the color ramp. So let's see how it looks. All right. It shouldn't actually be affecting the front, which is a little weird. Maybe I should add another color ramp here. That way I can crunch the value. Yeah, okay. So with this color ramp, we'll be able to crunch the values of our linear gradient here to make sure that it's not being lost. All right, so the cool thing now is that using this, like if I play with this location value, I can sort of randomize just the edge of my cloud. If I look at a bit from the back here, you can see that I can really change how it looks in the back. And if I change the scaling, it's gonna, the scale here, can make it very fine or very big. So pretty cool, right? Okay, so let's say you're ready to build your cloud. So you can put this into a new collection. So press M, new collection. We call it, I don't know, cloud piece. And you can hide it. And then if you press Shift A, collection instance, you can make a new cloud piece. And so this is a collection instance. If you've watched our previous Ghibli tree tutorial, you'll be familiar with this. Basically what it lets you do is you can just make a bunch of these and they all point back to the original one. So if you change the original one, they're all gonna update, and it's a bit faster to calculate and stuff. So, okay. So one of the issues you might encounter as you add more of these is you'll see some weird lines or artifacts appearing. And so don't panic, there's a way to fix it. Just press N, go to View, and change the clip start to something a bit higher. So just 0.1 is enough. It's because since we have those planes stacked up very close to each other, it's just messing up with the clipping plane. So so that should fix it. Now, as you build your cloud, you can always like rotate these to make some variation to it. So I'm just going to just try to recreate that that cloud very quickly. Okay, maybe change the light angle so it's facing more to this side. And I want to show you how we can achieve this darker region on the left here. So let me duplicate a bunch of these. Okay, so a few things you can do. First, if ever you want to reduce the strength of your normal map, you can do it. Just go to normal map here and change the strength. Just leave it update. Okay, so you can change the strength here, so it's not that strong. So sometimes it looks a bit blobby, so you can reduce it a bit. You can obviously continue to break it down a bit more if you want to. Okay. If you want, you can try increasing the distance of your ambient occlusion. So this goes further, and if it doesn't go far enough, you can play with your color ramp here and make this one go a bit further still. Okay. I'm gonna play with these values a bit. Maybe break it up just a bit more. Okay. Maybe bring one in front here. Okay. I might adjust my colors just a bit. So the first blue here, I think I'm gonna make it a bit lighter, maybe. Less saturated. Okay. And so there's a few other things you can do to tweak the look. If you create a light, like a point light, and then go to your light settings, deactivate shadows. I think I'm gonna lower my settings just a bit from my cube still. Here, maybe 0.9. Okay. So you have your point light. So if you move it somewhere, you'll be able to fill up the darker portions, and can increase the light size or the radius. Maybe that's too much. So you can sort of sometimes you want these areas to all be filled up. And in vertically, you can duplicate one and put a negative value. It's going to suck out the light from it. So something you can play with. And finally, a technique I find even more useful is to go back into your material, and we're going to add a gradient texture. So gradient, change this to spherical, press Ctrl T, and this will be, let's create a frame, and we call it extra light. So we'll add kind of a light, but using an empty. So let's create an empty here, plane axis. Move it to the top collection. Okay. And then change this to object, but this time pick the empty instead of leaving it empty, to use the object settings from your object. And we're gonna, just after this color ramp here, we're going to be adding a mix RGB. Use the factor from this as the mixing factor, and let's just pick this blue color here. So now if I move this, notice that I get this color appearing. It's because there's an actual spherical gradient in my 3D sphere, and the position is determined by the position of this empty. So I can move it around, but I can also scale it to make it softer. So what you can do is put it here to try to get those, like, you see how this is very soft here in the blue shadow. So you can sort of use this to achieve this effect. Can make it nicer blue here. And then you could duplicate it again and create another mix node. Duplicate all of this again. And use this as the mixing factor. And so in the front, what you could do is add a lighter color. Just make sure to change the empty location to the other one. So now you can add more light from this side. And it can be a very soft gradient. It's nice to blend things together using these empty. And since it's not an actual light, it's just a spherical gradient, it's going to give you that softer look because it's not concerned with the surface of your object, just its position in 3D space. So so all of this is still like editable. You can change the angle of your light, and like it's not gonna be perfect. I cannot make a very good looking cloud in 2 minutes, but with enough time, I think you could make a very nice looking cloud in possibly less time than it would take you to paint it. But it's also has the advantages of being in full 3D, so you can just find a nice angle, and it looks nice. and it has that very nice fuzzy edge that you couldn't get with pure geometry. Now there's one last thing that I'd like to show you, and it's how to add variation to your cloud piece. So let's say I duplicate this one on this side here, and because right now they all look the same, right? It's all this same blob. But what would be nice if we were able to make all of them a bit different. So I'm going to use a similar technique to what we did in the Ghibli tree tutorial. It's using the so in object properties, in viewport display, you have this thing called color, and we can access this color in the node editor, even though it's a color, it's a collection instance, because collection instance don't even have a material. I couldn't even apply another material to this one, but I can access its color here. So so let's just pick the cube, and then I'm going to add a object info node, and you see this color info is output is what we need. So we're going to, instead of using just one color, we're going to be using the red channel to do something, the green for something else, and the blue for another parameter. So I'm going to use a separate RGB because we need to separate the colors. So now I'll need a combine XYZ because we're going to be plugging these into vector inputs. And so I need to convert one value into 3. So what I would like to do is affect this, at first, this offset of my noise. So in the Y input here. And this is the noise. Don't confuse it with the linear gradient texture that we have on top. So let's plug the red in Y, and then this into the location. And then I'm going to duplicate this one. Now use the green color, but this time I'm going to be plugging it into X, Y, and Z, and plug this into scale. And finally, what I'm going to do is add a power node here. And I'm going to use the B color into it. Okay. So let's see how it looks. So now, if I pick this collection instance, I can play with its red color in viewport display, object properties to offset this value. So I can make all of these sides of the clouds a bit different. Then I can play with the green value to make this either very large blobs, or I could enter a big value to make very fine detail. Okay. And finally, my last setting is going to be my dissolve operator. So you see how it's dissolving my noise texture. The problem is we still have that linear gradient that's telling this part to always stay full. So we need to address that for it to work properly. So let's click on the cube. And so what we could do to make it go away is just to offset it, maybe in the X direction. You see? So if I were to go in the X minus here, it would just disappear. So by default, my color is going to be 1. So I need to, and I want it to, as I increase my value, I actually want this value to go into negatives. So I'm going to add a math node, and this one's going to be multiply, and we'll multiply by -1. So that way, as you increase the value, it's actually going to be a negative value. It's going to work. But the problem is, by default, my blue is going to be 1. So if I add, I invert it to -1, it's going to feed -1 into here. So I actually need to do something else here. I need to add 1 so that even though I start from 1, I make it -1, I need to add back 1 so that it's now 0. I don't know if that was clear, but hopefully it is. So let's add another combine x, y, z. And I think we said it's the x value that we need. So let's just go back here, viewport display, and change this back to 1, 1, 1. Okay, so if I move this value to something higher than 1, I can fade it away. So I can start making those really nice puffy cloud. Like, there's really no limit to what kind of cloud you can do with these 3 settings. So I think that's pretty nice. So you can combine them to add those like fading away puffy clouds on the side and stuff. That's pretty much it. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial and learned something. Sorry if it ended up a bit long-winded. It's always difficult to make something that's both technical and artistic at the same time. But as you can see here, the depth of what you can do is really impressive. So hope you give it a try. It's not the easiest technique to master, so don't get discouraged. Keep practicing and I'm sure you'll get there. Oh, and also, you guys need to check out this other tutorial. It's made by a guy named Kristof. He released it yesterday, and he's also found a really cool way to make Ghibli clouds. So if that's something you like, don't miss it. We'll put the link in the video description. I'm looking forward to do more tutorials for you, and I'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for watching. Did you know we're also developing an animated series called Dinomancers? We also have a 6-part tutorial series on how to make a full-featured toon shader in Blender. So if you like our work, make sure to check them out and subscribe to our channel. Alright, take care.